Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rhonda Studnick Kaiser, and I'm the Director of Customer Engagement for BigFix. And I'll be hosting our webinar today. Our subject today is strategies for staggering actions and for handling multiple results. Uh, we are recording our webinar today. If this presents you with any concerns, please drop at this time. You'll be able to join the session about an hour after we conclude as a video recording. You can use just that same link you used to register. You can also share that link with your colleagues. They will in turn get a registration page and that will take them to the video. We do invite you to ask questions at any time. Just use the chat interface and we'll either address them within the chat or we'll interrupt the presenter and have them answered live online. Today we have myself, John Talbert, our Director of BigFix Professional Services, Michelle McGough, BigFix Technical Engagement Manager, and Joe Saylor, our BigFix Accelerated Value Program Lead. So yeah, it's the same cast today, but never fear, there will be others, I promise.
And you'll note we don't have cameras on today because I figured rather than take a shower and do my hair, it'd be easier to just take down all of GoToWebinar's cameras. So sorry about that, guys.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about how to stagger actions using MOD. We'll dive into that here pretty quickly and some of the benefits of that, and we're going to talk about working with multiple results and action script. So like I said, let's dive in. One of the things that I faced when I was a big fixer and actually, actively out there patching was how to stagger actions to, lessen impact on our infrastructure or to kind of quasi create test strings or you could call them like QA groups of machines, but we have some ways of doing that and we're going to dive into that. So Joe, I know you and I have been through these wars together. Maybe you could take over and share.
Yeah, of course. Let's get sharing running here. So first things first, test string is like a pretty common term, but just to define it a little bit here, it's really the idea of sending out a set of patch actions to a smaller subset of machines so that if there is something wrong with it, your help desk doesn't get absolutely destroyed by 10,000 calls, right? The actual value for your test string, like the number of systems in it, will probably vary pretty wildly based on your enterprise's scale. For instance, I'm going to use the value 10% a lot here because it's easy to read, very easy to understand, and it just simplifies things. But if you were to, as your first test string in say a 300,000 endpoint infrastructure, if you deployed to 10% of your systems, that's 30,000 boxes that you just tested on. And if say 10% of those have a problem, you have 3,000 bricked systems. So take these numbers with a grain of salt, tailor them to your environment for sure, and for your risk levels. Okay, so first thing here, there's really two sides to this technically. The first bit is our built-in stagger. So anytime you go to take an action, you can see here you have stagger action start times over blank minutes. So this is really great for just spreading out load of an action. I think that you should probably use this anytime you are sending out an action to a large number of systems that includes, like, say, a patch download or maybe a really heavy action that uses a lot of CPU, so they don't all start at the same time. Microsoft patch is going to be somewhere in the range of a gigabyte, and if you have 10,000 boxes all downloading that at the same exact moment, you may piss off your network guys, and we really do not want to piss off our friends over in the network section because you need their help all the time.
Joe, I once pissed off not the network team, but the VMware host team by doing something like this. because all of the virtuals basically did the same thing at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, we call those VM storms, and you really just don't want to do that. It normally happens when you reboot those systems all at the same time because the act of booting up is just very expensive and will happily overload a thinly provisioned virtual hypervisor. So this is a great way to stagger those out and prevent any like performance impacts. So, in addition to like how useful it is, there's also some limitations here. You may note that you can't really control how these are targeted. Um, you'll have your target, but the way they stagger is just completely even, pretty much. It's decided at the endpoint level. So when a computer receives an action, it sees this stagger value, whatever you got, 5 minutes, 60 minutes. And at the time it sees the action and becomes relevant to it, it decides how long it's going to wait.
And that wait starts when? It starts from the moment you click the button, or
Yeah, that's a
when?
really great sneaky point here. I think as console operators, a lot of the time, especially when you're staring at this dialog, which has absolute start times and all that stuff up here, operators tend to think that, okay, when I click my button, that's when this definition takes place. So it's really tempting to think, I click this, and right now, between 0 and 60 minutes, my clients will run this action. When the reality is that it's whenever those clients receive the action. So that means that a box that is like if you have a laptop in a drawer and you pull it out 2 months from now, after you've deployed your patch, then it will, the user will log in, it will get this content from the server, and it will then decide to delay it by between 0 and 60 minutes. So it won't even patch the moment it comes online, even though it desperately needs it.
Right. So yeah, that's a good important point to keep in mind, especially if you have transient workforce people who are maybe on the road or they're online and offline. So it's from from when that person puts that machine online. So on Monday at 8 a.m., you may get a whole bunch of people coming in, and then a whole bunch of people 60 minutes later getting that download, right?
Yeah, and 60 minutes isn't even that scary an amount of time. The point where this gets a little weird and you may be tempted to use is that our maximum value here is actually around 10,000, right? So that's about 7 days. So if I go ahead and set this to say, my power level here to somewhere over 9,000, then when that system comes online from getting pulled out of a box, it might not run this patch for a week, even though this is really tempting to use. Like if I want to stagger all of my endpoint patches over, several days, this is a really easy way that you could do it, but you're kind of opening yourself up to some really like unforeseeable behavior.
Right. Either when they come back online or yeah, makes sense. Or if
Yeah,
they go offline before they actually get this run. And so then there's even more of these that are waiting to take over their system.
Oh,
yeah, and it just
that's a good point. Can I ask if a device becomes relevant, it hasn't run the action, goes offline, when it comes back, it doesn't have to evaluate relevance again. It's still relevant. So are we still in that staggered action time, or would that start over? And this might be getting to PhD level here, so
no that's
apologies.
perfect. This is BigFix Decoded, so this is where all that detail belongs. Yeah, so good question. The timer starts when the client sees the action and becomes relevant to it, and it does not restart if that client goes offline and comes back online, right? So, in this 1 week long scenario, if I, my client has randomly decided it's going to run 2 days from now, and it goes offline for those 2 days and comes back online like 4 days later, it would run the action immediately.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think it's valuable for me in thinking about this that when the client gets the action, either when it gets the action or on the starts on, it will randomize on one of those 2 points by up to whatever's in the box. Say it's 60 minutes. And that's the start time for that action on that client. So even if the client goes off, it comes back later, that start time was already decided when it was gathered. And it won't change even if it goes on and off several times before reaching that start time. Now, once it comes back on, if it's past the start time and not yet on the ends on time, it's going to fire, just like if you had set these explicitly without using the staggering.
Got it. These things really matter, especially, I remember I can't, I apologize to certain people who I worked with in the past for asking the question on multiple occasions, why hasn't this run? And then they said, it's a stagger. Oh, okay, it'll run. But I would get tripped up by it all the time.
Yeah, it's funny when you expect something to run immediately, and even if your stagger is like 2 minutes, that can really like mess with your head. Okay, so that's one half of the stagger story. The other half is doing things a little more in a little more detailed fashion. So we're going to talk math for a second here, and again, way too much detail, but presumably that's why y'all are here, maybe. And I popped ahead too far. There we go. So enter the mod inspector. So mod is short for modulo, which is really just the remainder of a division operation. So, we have an example on screen here. Our relevance 11 mod 5 here really just means 11 divided by 5 and whatever is left over from that operation. So, 5 goes into 11 twice, and then there's just 1 left over. So for this operation, we always get 1. That doesn't look that useful, but I promise it's a little better than it seems. So now that we have some way of getting a static integer from any particular number, we now have in computer ID a really stable and very unique number, right? This number for all of the computers in your environment is always going to be different, and it's always going to be the same for that computer. So that means that if you, instead of using just a static number in front of your mod inspector, use computer ID instead, then you will get a random number effectively between 0 and 4, because we always start with 0. Just the nature of the math here, your remainder can never be your divisor or above, right? It's always between 0 and your divisor. So now it will be some static number, right? In my case, for this box, my remainder is always going to be 4. And if we take that one step further into making this something slightly useful, you just add a comparator to it. So now if my computer ID mod 5 equals 4, which we know it does in this case, it will always get true, right? I will always return relevant for this particular statement. So this has the effect of kind of splitting out your environment into like a really even number of groups. So, if I were to do computer ID mod 5 equals 0 or equals 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, each of those individual groups is about a 20% split of your environment. We implement that through groups. So let's see, we have, let's not edit this. All right, so we have, here I have a 10% group. We're using computer ID mod 10 here. That will end up being about 10% because for a given computer ID, 10 is a really great example because it's like there's barely any math involved with it, right? If I divide anything by 10 and find the remainder, that means that any computer ID that ends in 0, their mod is 0. Same with 1 or 2 or 3. So it's really easy to kind of visualize that way. One little extra pro tip here, it is generally always a really great idea to design in some sort of exception system for these groups. In this case, for instance, I'm going to pretend like I'm running a hospital. I have some devices that run really important medical equipment that keep people alive, and they cannot go down, right? They cannot be restarted ever. So I've got a separate group here that is medical device exception group. So now anything that is in that group will not be relevant to this group. So now we've got a single group of boxes that are about 10% of your environment. They're stable. It's the same 10% every time, and they don't have any of your really important devices that can't be restarted or can't be just kind of automatically patched.
I like it. This is good.
This is, hey, Joe, there was a question that came in on the last topic that I
Sure.
did want to loop back around on for just a minute, going back to staggered actions. And the question is the run between window. Like if you say only run in between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. on Tuesdays, is there a chance that some actions might never get action because they never get into that window? And I think to answer that, we have to remember that the only thing that's randomized is basically the starts on part of the action. So as long as the window hits at least once after that starts on plus the randomization, then it will be actioned eventually. So it's actually the third checkbox there, the run between, right? So if you were to say, hey, this is going to start on, today at 10:17, and you've got 1,000 in your stagger action, it might be past 3 a.m. before this hits. But on the next day, it'll come back around and you'll be past the start time of the action that was decided when the action was gathered by the endpoint and adding that randomization. So as long as it hits at least once, yes, it'll fire. If that didn't fully clear, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. I mean, that's all accurate. On screen here, I have an example of a stagger time that will run over the run between time. So now this is going to be like 15% of boxes. Anything in that 60 to 70 minute stagger range will not hit on the first day, is what would happen here, right? So we would start, all of the timers would start at 1 a.m. And on today, and then about 15% of them, those that were in that 60 to 70 minute range, will not fire at all today, but they will fire immediately the next day, because this run between is also valid for the 25th.
Which, as a curious side effect, that means when you get to the next run between, all of the starts on are in the history, so you will get a ganging up here.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, technical bits aside, you're right. You can absolutely trap yourself, right? Like it's not great to run it this way unless you're really planning on having 15% of your boxes run the next day. So great catch. This is absolutely something that will create some unexpected behavior.
Great. If there's any follow-on to that question, go ahead and use the question tool again. Thanks, Joe. You can take us back to our mod piece.
Yeah, so we're still in defining groups right now, and we haven't really taken any action on them yet. Our very first group here, we're just 10% with some exceptions. If you want to make a larger group, I would generally recommend using the same divisor, but just kind of stitching together several of them. The reason that's important is that unless you pay very, very close attention to the math of different divisors, mod 5 versus mod 10 versus mod 7, it can look like you're getting different, like exactly different groups of boxes, and they might technically add up to 100% of your environment, but the way the numbers overlap, you'll have like some duplicates in certain groups. So if you use the same divisors, you'll never end up with duplicates, and therefore you'll never end up with maybe some unexpected behavior where one box runs something twice.
That makes sense. Good
Yeah.
check.
Yeah, so in this case, I've just done two groups, mod 10 equals 1 or 2, and that's going to end up being about the second 20 to 30% of my environment. So that would be like a slightly larger group, right? Our first ring was 10% of our boxes. Our second ring is now going to be 20% of our boxes. And at this point, we've probably had all the problems we're going to have. We've deployed to 30% of our environment. And so our final group is really just everything. And for the everything group, generally, I wouldn't recommend even using mod anymore. Just your all computers group is going to be probably more effective here. We would have almost certainly caught everything with, computer ID, mod, blah, and then all of the groups inside of there. But just in case, right? Like we want to simplify the relevance as much as possible so that there's just fewer moving parts in this catch-all group.
Makes sense.
All right, and then, when you're deploying stuff to these manually in the console, of course, you would just target them by group. If you are doing it at this point, kind of old school manual way with baselines, you would just dynamically target by property, by group, and then select your group for each ring. And, I would do these today. I would do my 20 to 30% group 5 days from now, and then the all computers maybe 10 days from now or 14 days from now, to give them time to breathe and surface any problems that might come up.
That's awesome. So can you use the same capability in like a patch policy? So then you're like not worrying about the targeting every time Patch Tuesday runs around, but it's just going to run.
Yeah, of course. So to close the loop on automation here, we've created our automatic groups. As new boxes come in, they'll just sort themselves into their appropriate groups. And if you are into not having to click on a bunch of stuff and create baselines every month, we got patch policies for you. So I don't want to go into the details of the content policy itself. There's plenty of content out there for that. But the way you target them is just through these groups that we just created. So, you would have a schedule for each of your test rings. We've got 3 here, you can see. Our targets are simply by the group. So I have my 10% group here. And then the frequency of it is targeted to Patch Tuesday. So that's the second Tuesday of every month. And for my first ring, I want to be, I personally want to be just super aggressive about getting these tests out. So it's the day after. Again, pay attention to your scale. For any large enterprise, 10% is a super big number to do the day that patches are released. I would probably target more like 1%. But then this deploys them immediately on its own without you having to like do anything to it.
There's an interesting nuance that goes along with that first bit that you said. So if you do a super small pilot group that's super aggressive, they're the same computers every month. And so talking to the people on those computers and saying, hey, if you've got a problem, on when patches go off, you call me directly, your BigFix person, instead of calling the help desk, because I need to know right away because you're in a special pilot group. Right, and that way your user is getting the warm and fuzzy. Hey, you're getting extra special care from IT, but you get the direct line on first response if there is a problem on that very small pilot group. So with the aggression, I like to give those folks a little bit of extra care.
Yeah, that's a super great symbiotic relationship, especially since if you're limiting the number of people and you know them really well, you only have to buy a couple of people a lot of beers and lunches for all the paper that comes up.
But by the same token, you know, especially in a large enterprise, even though you have the same people in those rings on a regular basis, they're going to have different software stacks. They're going to be doing different jobs. They're going to be logging into different systems. Maybe somebody's in HR, maybe somebody's in manufacturing. So the benefit of this is that you're not having to think about how to get a test string that kind of encompasses the world of your environment. Instead, by just using the mod, you're getting uh, a pretty good random sampling of, or a good enough, maybe. I mean, I'm sure there's other ways statistically, if you really wanted to do it, you could get even better by like using inventory to look at software stacks and stuff like that. But this is good enough to ensure that you're getting a good cross section of what your environment looks like. And that's certainly the way we used it. When I was doing this was, using it to kind of get a good mix of all the things that could go wrong in your large environment.
Yeah, and
The
that's
other
where the
nice thing
number
about
tuning.
here is that it's sort of self-maintaining. So as you add new computers, they're going to find their groups by themselves without any additional intervention. It's
Yeah.
self-maintaining. I think that's really a nice feature of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is really where tuning the numbers comes in. For that 300,000 endpoint environment, 1% is still a lot of boxes, right? Like that's still 3,000 test systems. But 1% of a 1,000 endpoint environment is only 10 systems, and you aren't necessarily likely to catch all the different kinds of things, right? So just make sure you have a reasonable number and a reasonable sample inside your group.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that global too, that's the other part of it. Sometimes it's hard to find a test string that's global. So maybe you have people that are using, like Japanese language Office or something like that. Just it's just super, in my opinion, it's one of the secret tricks that's super handy to really, you know, do a good job, especially with Microsoft patches, because they can be so problematic. Awesome. Anything else we want to talk about, Joe?
Yeah, I think that's about it for staggering actions. The clever use of mod is key to the whole thing, and then just make sure as you deploy things that you have reasonably sized groups and that you don't have any say executives in your test group, right? Like that's one of the other common exceptions that you're really going to want to pay attention to.
Oh yeah. Don't reboot the CEO.
Please no.
Yes. Yes. All right.
So it occurs to me there's another place I've used mod in a creative way, and it's actually in web reports. Um, so the use case that I've used it is developing custom web reports, which is a little bit tough to do. And one of the things that I find is a frequent flyer challenge with doing session relevance and doing kind of custom reports is one of scale. Because if I do like Bez Fixlets, comma Bez computers, that's going to cross multiply. If I've got 1,000 computers and 100,000 Fixlets, that's a million records that it's going to have to instantiate because of that cross product thing. So in order to kind of deal with scale there, it's the same problem all over again. So yeah, give me just like the names of the best computers, right? So this would be your entire estate. And that's not too expensive a query, honestly, but let's use the method here. So that's going to be the who's, and it's going to be just ID, I think. Yep. Mod 10 equals 1. And let's fire. And if I don't get any, oh, I got some. Okay, but if I didn't get any or I didn't like the set that I got, I could just change the 1 to a different digit from 0 to 9 and get a different set. And it's just like in your groups, it's a recurring set that will be the same size. And then as I'm working up scale, once I get something that is tame and doesn't take up too much memory on the server. Actually, on this, I do it a little bit differently, Joe. What I do is I just reduce the mod number which is a different set. But with session relevance, it's maybe not really that important. So maybe go for a mod 5 and double my size, right? And maybe go for a mod 4 and you know I'm just increasing the set of, and I can do this not only with best computers, but Fixlets also have IDs. You can mod on the IDs. Actions have IDs. You can mod on the IDs of the actions. Any place you've got an integer you can use to reduce the scale. Oh, there's probably a lot of those. Yeah. So
That's really cool.
yeah, that's I like the number of that. That really gives you a visual on how much you're reducing. Oh, you got a per in there. Yeah.
Wow.
And it should be about third, so or 10th there. So
So
a
this
little
is
bit
a
higher.
funny, so this is a funny thing about the math about mod, right? Because it's a static thing and we're using mod 10. This is just every fixlet that ends in 1. And geez,
Yeah.
when you make a fixlet, the very first fixlet in any site, it's always 1. And so our percentage value here is not actually 10%, right? It's quite a lot higher than that
Change
because
it
the
to
first one
0.
is always 1.
Yeah. What's 0 do? Is it dramatically different? Yeah, it is. Look at
Dramatically.
that. I mean, 6,000. So there is some amount of flex. I didn't actually expect to see that much flex in our sample size. Very interesting that it's the Fixlet ID 1 being the root cause there.
And we learned
We do.
something new today. Oh, we should show them how to resize that little relevance window.
Oh,
Since we all
I
learned that yesterday.
Oh my
Oh my
gosh.
God, I've
Yeah.
been struggling with scrolling in this darn thing forever. And then Rhonda pointed out, hey, what are those little lines down there? And so after a decade of fighting with this thing, I now have a technique. So thank you, Rhonda. I truly appreciate that. There is a question in the chat. Why are we using mod and not first X of?
So that's another thing about how the math works, especially on computer ID. So it is a unsigned integer, and
Mhm.
there's that goes up to what 2.7 something 2 billion. Anyway, so it maxes out at the first digit is 2, right? And
Mhm.
so if you said first digit is 3, then we're going to have a whole lot of systems inside this completely random number set that just don't have a 3 at the beginning because the vast majority of them are going to be either 1 or 2 because inside that number set, right, our first billion is totally random. We're not limited. Our second billion from 1 to 2 will always have a 1 at the beginning, and then our third billion from 2 up is always has a 2 at the beginning. So like the vast majority of first will be 1 or 2. And so then your numbers get just skewed dramatically because of that.
And this is why I never took math.
Now, for the number that I've been using for 10, you could definitely use last, right? Like last number of computer ID would be the same because that's really all we're looking at. But that's mostly because my example is super simple.
And we're using base 10.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just tried that one out on my web reports, and it does work. I could do like names of best computers whose last one of ID of it is string equals 1, and that does work. So, but I find it's a lot more typing, a lot more words, and the mod function. I've gotten really used to using that one. Also,
And you would
the mod function lets you do things other than base 10. So do mod 16, mod 45, mod 232 if you wanted to. Whereas the last X or the first X won't let you do that. It'll only let you work in the base that you're in.
Yeah, the finer control is definitely where you get good stuff out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the great question.
All
Oh,
right,
are we,
did you want to take over for this next segment, John?
sure, let's do it. I will share my screen. And let's
We're
So
moving
Michelle, do
on
you want to
to,
set up yeah, let's talk about
yeah,
multiple results.
it's kind of a rough segue, but we got the inspiration for this month's webinar really just based off of the search strings that I saw in the forum. These two were the most popular search strings in the past month. So the second one that we're moving into is, well, okay, the search string was a little confusing because it said multiple results from a fixed-lit action, but that could have meant one of many things. And when I checked the click-throughs to see what y'all were clicking through to when you search for that, it wasn't clear to me what you actually wanted. So we brought back multiple responses here. So I think is the first one we're starting with relevant substitution with multiple results. Is that where we're going to
it
start?
it
Yeah,
absolutely is. Yeah.
cool.
So this is something that I've been doing for years, and there's examples of it out on the forums. We've been using this for a long time, and the problem space is, well, let me set it up this way. Um, Anytime you want to do something dynamically in ActionScript and you're going to have multiple things that need to be done and you don't know how many they're going to be, using relevant substitution is a method of doing it, but relevant substitution doesn't take plurals. As long as there's one result, it works just fine. But if you try to put a plural into it, it doesn't know what to do with it, and you'll get a relevance substitution error. But there's a method, an approach for taking care of that. The use case that I'm using today is one of computer users, because it was really easy to add them and there was really easy to add a few multiples. So I've got my users group, and in my BigFix user group, or my operating system users groups, I've got Bob and Matt and Tom, and those guys aren't actually supposed to be local users. So this is a problem space that I want to take care of. Brawley 33 and NT2 authorities are good. I want to keep them around, but I want to get rid of anything that's not one of those three accounts. So the first thing I did, I played around a little bit with the relevance to pull it. So here's my local group, here's the members, here's all the members, and I want to get these guys are good. I want to keep them. So I built a filter on top of the members who's, and I said, hey, if any of the NT authority accounts are there, I want those to stick around. So I want to filter them out of my search. Also, the one that's the Brawley 33 account, I don't want to clear that one out. That's a legit account. So this second query just takes the list and trims out the stuff that's supposed to be there, leaving anything that's not supposed to be there. If I was to just add another user in here, it would magically be added to that list. I know that there is a command on Windows. It's net user Bob / delete. And I could use that to delete the Bob account. And what I might want to do is if my instincts would say, hey, I should do, let me pull this up so I can show this. I could do, if I knew what the accounts were, I could do, let me see if I can make this bigger. No, I cannot. I could do these wait hiddens, right? Wait hidden, net user Tom, delete Tim, delete Matt. What I might want to be able to do would be to wait hidden and then net user and then use relevant substitution and then / delete. That's really what I want to do. And then if I just pulled these three names just as they are in there, this would run, but the problem is this turns into a plural. Actually, let me get rid of this piece. this turns into a plural. So this plural is going to blow up this line, and you'll get the relevance substitution error. So what do you do about that? The thing you do is you build a file. It's either going to be a batch file if you're on Windows, or it's going to be a shell script if you're on non-Windows. And we're going to use the append file command to do that. So I'm going to start with just this piece. There's my plural, the thing that gives me a plural. Up, and this is my adds. Where's my removes? I don't have my removes. I'll build it. So if we just take a look at this piece alone, it's going to give me Tom, Tim, and Matt. And if I then take this part alone, I can take for each of these things, give me a string, net user, a space, and then the name, and then the /delete that I need. So this is going to synthesize the 3 commands that I need. And then this is still a plural. The way I get around that is I concatenate these into one result, and I concatenate it with a separator. And this separator, if this is a batch file, is going to be %0d, %0a, which is carriage return line break. If we're doing a shell script, it would just be %0a. So what this does is it generates, instead of 3 individual lines, it creates a line that has 3 things in it. But when this goes into a file, Windows is going to say, oh, that's a carriage return line break, and it's going to make a file with 3 lines in it. That's going to be my batch file, and when I run this thing as a batch file, it's going to do these 3 things and delete the 3 elements. And here's where I actually build the batch file. So I clean up my append file, I make sure that remove bat doesn't already exist. I do the relevance to pull those 3 users off. I copy my append file to the remove.bat file, and then I just wait for the remove.bat file to run. Now that's fine if I have a static list and I know who's in there, but what if I want to do the filtering? I can do that with this piece here that we've already developed, where we've filtered the list down, and then we've gotten rid of the part in front of the slash, because the net user command doesn't want that, just wants the username. So with this relevance, I can basically instantiate between these 2 things instead of this that gives me 3, I can do this entire relevance that will synthesize it. And this is what will end up in that batch file. So we're going to delete Bob, we're going to delete Tom, we're going to delete Matt. And those, I believe, are the 3 users that we don't like. Bob, Matt, Tom. Yeah, they're all there. Okay, so I'll go ahead and fire this off. And it should clean these up. Actually, I'm going to use this flavor, which has the members and the filtering.
So John, I'd kind of like to back up to our string manipulation portion of this, because that's kind of where all that magic happens, like the very first plural string. And just to help point out here, so typing matters, the type of result that you get, right? In our, see your other window, or yeah, there you go, Bob, Tom, Matt there. Because that's a plural string, that's what allows us to just use really basic operations, that ampersand, right? Ampersand it, ampersand whatever you want. That's where the magic lets you, that's where this just lets you kind of magically put in your command, like whatever command it needs to be. So, pay close attention to this. When you break relevance down in this way, down into its individual little nuclear components, that lets you like more easily visualize what's going on, because it's really tempting when you grab something off the forum that's complete, like our like our end statement here, you know, a concatenation, CRLF of the whole thing. It's really tempting to pull something like that off of the forum and then not really break it down. And so when you go and try and modify it to do what you need it to do, it's not as easy to visualize, right? So when you pull it all the way down to the very bottom components, like you start with your plural string, you start with your string modification, going through this whole process uh, really gives you an easier, more complete understanding of the thing that you're working with.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I've been doing this so long, I sometimes will jump ahead and skip a critical step like that that is just natural to me, but might not be obvious. So you're right. This is the magic. So if I needed a different command, if I was trying to add users here, there we go. It's this part turns into the variable that gets inserted into the larger command.
And one thing I really like with using the Fixlet debugger and not just say Q&A is all the markup it gives you. Like obviously we have nice pretty colors here for the objects versus the strings, but yes, when you go ahead and click on it there, it tells you exactly in the highlighted section where you're getting it from. And so paying very close attention to that will just help you out tremendously.
Yep. So I'm going to fire this one off. This is going to remove multiple users, and I'm going to action that on my root server here, and I'll do a message so we see when it's running. All right, so that should fire off. We should get a little pop-up as we do the next one when it runs. And we'll come back and check to make sure the users have indeed been deleted. I do want to also touch base on another piece, and that is multiple results in an action, which, let me see, where do I have that? Here we go. So if I'm in my actions and I've taken a baseline, an action on a baseline, I can see those results in web reports. I can also see them in the console, but I'll start with web reports here. If I click in, just in Explore Data Actions right here, it'll show this baseline, which only has 3 fixlets, and they're very simple fixlets. I can show them to you in a second. But this has been actioned, and each one of these has its own individual exit code. And I can't see those codes here. That's an instance of multiple results, and I actually can't see them on this page either. I can see progress, right? There it is, 5 reported. And if I click in, I can see reported, and these 5 were fixed, these 5 were no result, these 5 were fixed, I didn't have any failures. But to see those individual exit codes can be very valuable. So the only one, well, I'll check this one first. So I'm gonna click into there, and there for each computer that took this action, I've got the exit code for that computer. And if I check into Fixlet 2, I actually have not relevant as the result, and they didn't run anything, so there's no exit code. I set that up intentionally that this one would be skipped by all computers. So that's an expected result for me. And then for this last one, I actually have an exit code, and I got an exit code of 33, which doesn't mean anything specific. It just happens to be the exit code that was returned when these were run. And I can drill down and see them here. But I can't see them really all in the same place. To get them all in the same place, I have to result back to session relevance. And I will give you a quick rundown on that. So let me put this off on Notepad for a moment. I'm going to just start with the BES actions. And this is going to pull oh, I need my tags. So in order to make this stuff into relevance, I've got to add a special server-side tag. and that will make this into relevance instead of just text. Okay, string not defined. So let's pull the name. Okay, and that's the name of the action. And the thing about baseline actions, this will give it, I could get the results and get the exit code of the top wrapper, the baseline itself, but it doesn't have the interesting stuff that I had for each individual sub action. So those things are called member actions. And it should give, yep, fix it 1, 2, and 3. So those were the members. And then for each of these, I want to do a thing. So I'm going to create a clause there, names of, it will be the member actions. And then I want the number of results. So Fixlet 1 has 5 results, Fixlet 2 has 5 results, Fixlet 3 has 5 results. The number is just a placeholder so that I can at least see something happening. I'm interested in the name of the computer that gave the exit codes. Okay, so Fixlet 1 has a 000 and Fixlet 3 has a 33 5 times, and Fixlet 0 doesn't have any because it doesn't have any exit codes. Remember earlier we said Fixlet 2 is not relevant, it didn't run. This is great, but I can't see which computers these are aligned with. So I want not only the exit code of the result, but I also want the name of computer of the result. And then I should magically be able to see, here's Fixlet 1, green gave me a 0, Brawley gave me a 0, green V2 gave me a 0. It doesn't go all the way to 9,000, but it does go up as far as I need it to. Green 33, these are, yeah, so I can see in one place all of these exit codes. If I wanted to, I could structure this a little bit differently and concatenate these things together. So do that. It's in a paren. Yep. I need to go back up to the member action to do that. I'm going to skip that because we're getting low on time. But the point of this is being able to get to those multiple results, either through just clicking and getting to each individual multiple result, or by creating a little bit of custom relevance. And we'll share this in the forum posting when we're done here, so that you've got a thing to play with. Actually, I'll paste it right in the chat right now. So if you're really eager to play with it, there it is.
Awesome.
Rhonda, do we have time for anything else, or are we wrapping?
We've got just a few quick minutes. One thing that I know, well, yeah. Why don't we make sure that we get out of here on time? So there's another thing that we talked about yesterday when we were pulling things together and doing some dry runs of this event, which was properties with multiple results. So that's another one that I know stymies people, especially like if they're looking at a property result and the console and it has multiple values, or it says multiple results, and how to see that. So that's another one we may want to show where how we can get that out via session relevance. You know, and I think you showed us a quick shortcut too about how you can see it right in the console.
Yeah,
through some drill downs.
Yeah, that one I got time to show. So here's a computer that has multiple IP addresses, and in the console I can hover over and I can see what they are, but that's not really convenient. Especially if it's a huge long list of say open services or registry keys or some other piece that you may be pulling, like installed software. The multiple result might be longer than can even fit on the screen. So how do you get to that thing? Now, the way you get to it is you open this. You can do this right in the console, and you can go to anything like this, services windows. This would be a multiple results, but in this view, I can see the entire thing.
And you know, if you're looking for something specific, you can do Control F right there, and you can find whatever value you're looking for.
Nice.
And there you have it. One more small little detail that might help some people, or maybe people have forgotten that you can do that. All right, so let me quickly reshare my screen. I think we are at the end of our time. So, you know, what did we intend to cover today? We wanted to talk to you about how to stagger actions using mod, and you know, talking about the benefits of that. You know, we can see some better performance. We can certainly do actions at scale. We have the ability to create randomized test strings, and John talked to us about how you can do web reports at scale when you're testing out some session relevance. So hopefully that was valuable to you, and you learned a new trick. And we also showed you how you can use that in patch policy, which is great. And then we talked about working with multiple results and action scripts. So we did the relevant substitution piece. We looked at the baselines and how to get those exit codes from baselines out in a view that you can see across something in a report. And then, you know, a little bit there on how to view a custom or analysis property with multiple results. So hopefully you learned something new today, or you remembered something that you'd forgotten, or you know, you reinforced that thing that you do on a regular basis. And yeah, hopefully that's great. So with that, I want to go ahead and thank John, thank Joe, thank Michelle for being here today. Thanks, guys.
It's our pleasure.
Thanks for having
Yeah,
us.
for sure.
Awesome. And thanks to all of you guys for joining us today. The recording of the event will be up in about an hour. Just follow that same registration or join link for this event. And yeah, we do have a post-event survey. We do look at that. We are interested in your thoughts. If you have topics you'd like to see covered in a future event, we're always open to that. Yeah, thanks again, and we'll talk next month. I think our next webinar will be May 29th. So bookmark. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.